Hello, everybody, and welcome to Haiku Talk. I'm your host, Ben Ga, your friendly neighborhood haiku poet, and today we're going to be taking a look at a piece by Scott Mason from the current issue of Modern Haiku. It's a one-line poem, so I'm going to take the fragment, which is the last two lines in the poem, and just kind of we'll use that as our makeshift title. So that will be The Drought. The Drought. All right, you know what time it is. It's time to sit back, relax, grab yourself a tasty beverage, and let's haiku. Welcome back, everybody. It's good to be with you again for another episode of Haiku Talk. Let's get right to the poem. Again, this comes from Modern Haiku, their summer 2025 issue, volume 56.2, from veteran poet Scott Mason. The poem goes like this. Outing a lake's inner river, the drought. Outing a lake's inner river, the drought. This is a good one. And it's one that I think it's a nice one to use as a representation of a one-line poem because it does, I think the one line works very well here. But it's also one that some people might struggle with when they read it the first time because of it's not as transparent as to what's going on right away. And that's because the way that the poem is constructed and what's happening in the poem are kind of things that are a little unusual from what we experience in day-to-day life. So here we go. Unlike this poem does follow the fragment and phrase format. So the fragment here is the last two lines of the poem, which is the drought. And the phrase leads this poem, which are the words, outing a lake's inner river. So outing a lake's inner river is your phrase. And it's an interesting phrase, outing a lake's inner river. What does that mean? What's happening there? So the word outing in this case, meaning we are calling attention to, we are exposing. So the drought at the end there is exposing that the lake is fed by a river. And the river is not something that you can see when the lake is full because it's covered up by water. So we have these around here in the Missouri, Illinois area, at least my part of the state. We have these rivers that get dammed, and the dammed river kind of backs up, and it creates a big lake. And when you're just looking at that big lake, it's hard to know that there's a river in place that's actually feeding and creating that lake. And that river hits the dam and it backs up and it creates this giant lake. But in drought times, the water can get so low that the river is exposed. It's outed, if you will. This is clever language here. And so in this poem, what's happened is the drought is so low that the river that feeds the lake is exposed. And it's just a really clever way of writing the poem. And it's crystal clear once you blink your eyes and a couple times and what is this? Because the language is interesting. And it's a little bit, I don't want to say it takes a reader to really see what's going on here and see how the language jumps around and see how the fragment and the phrase work and to put the scene together. And to me, the first time I read it, the first couple passes by, I got it right away, but it took getting all the way through the poem to get to the drought to really call into focus what that phrase was ahead of time. And In a three-line poem, sometimes we think that third line in the three-line poem can be the aha moment that makes the whole thing tie together. In this case, it's really that gap that between the words river and then the for the drought that is our cut, and is the thing that causes you to get to the end and be like, oh, that's what we're seeing here. And in a short poem like this, like a haiku, that's a wonderful thing because you don't have to go very far back to the beginning to reread it with all the context, with all the information that you now have, having completed the poem. And I know that these are short, but a lot of people's attention spans are really short, and they might get a little. They might not want to wait till the end to get to the punch of this poem. And because they're hit with the phrasing, the outing a lake's inner river. You know, it's not a common phrase. It's not a common sounding phrase, but it's a good one. It's a really darn good one. And it's perfectly describing what's happening. And it's definitely choices by Scott Mason, to construct the poem and the verbiage in this way, to bring you into the moment and give you that punch then at the end of the drought. And you're really experiencing the weight of the drought. You might say that it causes a chaos around it, causes because the whole landscape changes. And in the landscape changing with the low water, where you can see this now, the source of this lake, the verbiage that's used here is just, I don't know. I just really like it and really enjoy it, and thought this might be a good one to focus on here and have you guys hear me read it out loud, which might give you a clue on how I read it in my head. I usually read these. I usually find that I read a lot of the poems out loud, either in my head with an internal monologue, or I'll actually read them out loud, because that helps me. I like the weight, the sound of a poem can really add meaning to what's on the page, and that's not true for all poems. Some poems pretty much exist on the page, but this one, it really helped me to read it out loud and to feel and see what's going on and get to the end of the drought, and then you realize, oh my gosh, it's the drought, and you really feel the drought, the weight of that drought, because the whole landscape, everything that came before it, is all mucked up, because we can now see these bare things. The river that was buried under the lake is now laid bare. It's been outed. And again, outing, that's such a great word, an interesting word choice. And these are things that myself as a poet, I might not have written this poem this way. It's uses language in a way that's different than I use it and I speak. And it's important, and it's really cool to get these other perspectives and see the different ways language is used to produce a poem and to produce, a very striking image like you see here. Because that's kind of how we learn, how we grow, how we get out of our own, beats and rhythms, and experience other people's ways of writing and ways of seeing. And this poem is just a really great example. Again, I'm going to read it again. I'll read it twice. Outing a lake's inner river, the drought. Outing a lake's inner river, the drought. Wow, it's just the fact that we're now seeing that the lake has an inner river. It's exposed. It's been outed. That's cool. And what's interesting is that it doesn't attach a weight around the drought. I mean, we then are left to feel the weight of what the poem is. And for me, I'm just blown away, or just thinking about the idea that you can now see this river that runs through the bottom of a lake that you normally couldn't see. But if you take this and sit with it a while longer, well, then you think about the drought. And then you start to think about, well, what causes the drought? And then you can start going into any number of different avenues as to what might have caused this to occur. You pull from memory, you pull from other things that you read, other things that you're following in the news, perhaps other causes and issues that are important to you, and they suddenly become intertwined with this poem that Scott has written. And it's just a really great thing about reading a lot of work that may be similar or different than yours, and embracing it, and looking at what somebody is doing and understanding how that works. Because those things will build up in your own internal haiku toolbox, and help you out when you're writing, when you come across things. Like, you might use the word outing in a way that's in this case, it's tied to a lake. It's not tied to the normal kinds of issues in the day that the word outing gets attached to. Or just the next time you're driving or you're passing a lake that is there because of a dam. Don't think not just about the dam, but think about that river beneath all of that water, the big lake water that's actually the real root of everything that you're taking a look at. Like, I always think I end up focusing on the dam and the water passing through, and the different the hydrothermal, the hydropower that's coming out of that, and seeing it as a source of green energy, because that's just where my brain goes. But I never really stopped to think about the lake, the river that's being fed into that's actually building this beautiful lake that I might be taking a look on, or taking my kayak on, or just, enjoying in any ways that you enjoy a lake. And I know I'll keep that in my head. Like, ooh, I wonder where the river is. I wonder where it snakes through underneath this water. Hopefully there won't be a drought that will expose it, but it's there. It's happening, and that's kind of cool. So anyway, that's it for today. Thank you all for tuning in. I do appreciate it. Thank you, Scott, for a wonderful poem. Thank you, Modern Haiku, for continued excellence in your publications. And I got to say, this blackberry Dr. Pepper is really darn good. Normally, I don't like fruit juices in my soda, and I don't drink a lot of soda, but it's good. Just saying. And no, they're not a sponsor of this video. I don't have sponsors, but sometimes you like to pass along information because it's a crazy thing, but it's pretty good. Anyway, until next time, peace in your world, happy writing, happy reading, happy life.